Hello everyone, today we will do the analysis of universal basic income using leisure and consumption model. We will start as brief introduction of UBI. UBI is a universal basic income and which is the cash payment every individual receives without any reference to their other income or wealth and without any conditions. The history of UBI can be traced back to 16th centuries, and the ideas of UBI has few waves during the 20th centuries but didn't attract a lot of attention to the government or the people. Until recently, the idea of UBI gained significant attention, especially after the pandemic. And today we will use the leisure consumption model to analyze the effects of UBI. Firstly, what is the leisure consumption model? The leisure consumption model illustrates the balance individuals find between work, leisure, and consumption, and people choose how much to work based on their wages, leisure preferences, and consumption needs. What will happen to this model if we introduce the UBI and the flat marginal tax rate to this model? At first diagram, we can see that if we have introduced a UBI to this model, the budget constraint will definitely shift upwards due to the income effect that UBI has, and the shift amount is exactly equals to the amount of UBI. But for the flat marginal tax rate, if we add a tax to the wage that people has, it will pivot down the budget constraint due to the slope of this budget constraint illustrate the real wage rate, and the tax amount change the real wage rate that people has. So it will pivot down. And y for the intersection of x-axis doesn't change because the t is the endowment of time, and we assume that endowment of time doesn't change in this model. If we combine the effect of UBI and the flat marginal tax rate together to this model, there will be three scenarios we compared with the tax amount and the UBI they receive. In the scenario 1, especially for those like low income people, after they receive UBI, they need to pay amount of tax, but the tax amount is less than the UBI they receive, so the total amount of money increases in these scenarios, and we can see the new budget constraint as the blue one. As we analyze the substitution effect and the income effect, we can see that the total effect is positive, and people will prefer to work less in this situation, so the labor supply will decrease. In the scenario 2, people receive a UBI, and after they pay the tax, the UBI amount they receive exactly equals to the tax amount they pay. So in these situations, we can see that in the diagram, the substitution effect and the income effect are also both positive in these situations, and the total effect is also positive. So people in this situation will prefer to work less, and the labor supply will definitely decrease as well. But it becomes more complicated if we analyze it for those high-income person who will likely to pay much more tax than the UBI they receive. In this scenario, we consider that after they receive a UBI, they pay much more tax than the amount of the UBI. So the budget constraint will be the blue one in the graph. As we can see that due to the uncertainty amount of the income effect, we cannot sure that the total effect, whether it is positive, negative, or doesn't change. So it is uncertain. Labor supply depends on the substitution effects and the income effects. It can either increase, decrease, or stay the same. And in the real world, the situation is much more complicated. As for the welfare analysis, we can definitely see that in the scenario 1 and 2, people consume more, which would stimulate the demand and potentially drive the economic growth. And the social equality will also improve due to the redistribution, and it will reduce the income inequality in the society. And also, introduction of the UBI could ensure the economic security and also have some effects on poverty alleviation. As for the advantages of using UBI, firstly, the UBI could directly reduce the poverty levels by producing everyone with a minimum income level, ensuring the basic needs are met. Secondly, the introduction of the UBI increased the economic security and flexibility because UBI offers a safety net that could encourage entrepreneurship and allow individuals to pursue education or training without immediate pressure of earning an income. Thirdly, the introduction of the UBI will improve the people's mental health and physical health because the UBI could reduce the stress that people have, which also increase the happiness of the society. And lastly, in some extent, the introduction of the UBI could correct the gender imbalances in the current system, because in the current system, women has much more responsibility of children care than the men, so the income they receive is less than the men, and the introduction of the UBI in some extent give them an insurance and correct the gender imbalance in the current system. As for the disadvantages of UBI, the UBI can firstly has income effect, then lower the labor participations, where the income effect will let people to work less because they have more income and more they are afford to purchase more leisure, so it will definitely disincentive the labor market, which is not good for the development of the country. And secondly, the introduction of the UBI may probably lead to the inflation, both the demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation is due to the much more consumption, and cost push inflation if the UBI is financed through higher taxes on production, companies might pass this cost on the consumers, leading to the cost push inflation. And the introduction of the UBI needs a high cost in the government. Although government can cover this cost by tax the revenue they receive, but some of the people in the economic, their tax burden maybe increases. As for the limitation of using this model is oversimplify the behaviors in the real world that people has, and this model assumes the rational decision making and may not accurately reflect the complex human behaviors and motivations. And also, this model doesn't consider the social and economic factors, including the social norms, psychological states, or economic dynamics that can influence labor supply decisions. And we should make many assumptions in this model to analyze these problems. For example, in the leisure consumption model, we assume that the leisure is no more goods. Then we can do the other analysis after that. But in the real world, the situation is much more complicated, and we cannot make so many simple assumptions in the model. To conclude, how labor supply and how labor market will react to the introduction of the UBI and the tax together depends on the different situations and the different income levels that people are in. And we can definitely see that the effect of the UBI will cause a significant effect in the economic, both positive and negative. And also, if we want to analyze this more and deeper on the effect of UBI, much more comprehensive analysis and research should be taken to consider this kind of problem. And these are the references I use. Thank you.